you want the camera on or off yourself?
On is fine.
On is fine. Sorry.
So a nice wallpaper. I don't want to touch it.
Right.
Is it as suave as it looks? Velvety?
There's some
What's your Twitter?
Sorry?
What's your Twitter?
Marco underscore Poseidon. Yeah, this one.
Right. Okay, we're good.
Cool.
So if anyone wants to share the link, it's on our Twitter. Okay, over to you, my friend.
All right. All right, good day, everyone. My name is Marco Huberts, and I'm just very happy to be here. So I am a scientist. I work in virology and oncology. We try to test some cancer-killing viruses on pancreatic cancer. But also, I'm co-founder of PoSciDonDAO, together with Ayat, which is sitting here as well. And as a scientist, I just got really frustrated with how we are creating our treatments and the current healthcare system. And we can safely say that it's broken. There are several reasons for that. We have too expensive treatments. They are inaccessible. The mortality rate is not going up of patients and is going up. And the current therapies are too general for the patient's needs. And we need to create more patient-tailored treatments. So pretty much we can say that your treatment plan is a shot in the dark. So the questions that we ask ourselves, is this the top? Can we improve our health or not? So we believe that personalized medicine is the end of disease. And we know that patients have a unique genetic background which impacts how treatments, how they respond to treatments. And if you don't correct for that, or if you don't take into account their genetic background, this can have a very large impact on the treatment response. So even over 90% of the genetic variations have a major impact on drug response. And when we look at personalized medicine, is that we do look into their genetic makeup and then tailor our treatments based on that genetic makeup. An example of that is breast cancer. We know there are several subtypes of breast cancer, and based on the subtypes, we can then treat these patients accordingly. But there is a lot of knowledge regarding breast cancer, but with other diseases, there is not that much information on the genetic background and treatment response. So personalized treatment really requires a lot of funding. We need to identify those subgroups of patients, but the research funding process is a wicked problem. It's broken as well. So science isn't a problem, it's the funding, and the funding process is highly centralized and biased. There are multiple examples of that. It can be institutional bias, personal bias. I've experienced that myself. And some examples of the biases can also be the political decisions, favoritism over who gets what funding, which research project get funding and which ones don't. And these biases just jeopardize innovation, and they hamper the innovation as well, with the result that we cannot treat the patients as well as we possibly can. So a solution would be PoSciDonDAO, where we aim to redefine the personalized medicine funding process. And we do that by leveraging blockchain technology. And with that in mind, we can then promote groundbreaking treatments and then create those and tailor them to each individual patient. So with this system, we can then fund research based on merit. We create a permissionless architecture. With improved and tailored treatments, we can reduce healthcare costs and then have a higher success rate for patient recovery. So how do we plan to do this? So this is a high-level overview of how we try to achieve this. And we have two tokens. We have our Psi token and a Po token. And the Psi is the only tradable token that we have. You get some voting rights if you stake that on our platform. There's some incentive for token holders that they, when we generate revenue, we, based on response to this, we can initiate a back and then burn those tokens. So there's some more additional incentive there. And also what we see with many DAOs is that they have to often beg for users to participate in their governance. And we solve that by introducing our Po token, which is non-tradable, and you can receive that every time you participate in our governance system. We also want to incentivize scientists to get their research funded by us, and we have a 30% of the revenue will then be distributed to scientists. So the next part is that we use into a dual governance system. So we have a governance system for research funding and a governance system for DAO operations. And the DAO operations are available to anyone who has a Psi token. And the research funding is where we have elected scientific advisors that are going to decide which research project is going to receive what funding. So what can we achieve with our dual token and dual governance system? So we have 4 aspects. We want to distribute our revenue to important parties, to the scientists, to the investors. We want to attract scientists and investors with those incentives, and also active or incentivized participation in our governance system. So this is our team. As I said, co-founded this with Ayat. We have several advisors. We have Omar as a medical advisor, Rakan as a scientific advisor, and Neville, who has experience in Web3 on the gaming side, but works for us as a business advisor. So what have we achieved so far? We have set up a legal entity, brand and website has been developed, and also most of our decentralized application has been developed, but we're still improving and adding features as well. We also surveyed our scientists and we asked them the questions to confirm that there is actually a problem regarding bias, regarding incentive rewards in science. And we are associated with several parties that we have mentioned here below. So when we look at our competition, we pick these, but there are many other bios that are part of that. So PoSciDonDAO focus on personalized medicine. We're on a network that has low gas fees, allowing users to easily participate in our on-chain governance system. And we also have this IP NFT framework, which we still have to look more into it, but this is still a work in progress. So imagine a tomorrow where we are unbound by traditional limits, where we can actually innovate or speed up the innovation of personalized medicine discoveries. We can then transform patient care and redefine the scientific funding process with our on-chain systems and incentivize innovation through the revenue sharing model with the scientists and investors. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
So I raised my hand first.
Go ahead.
I'm sure it did.
I raised my hand and you didn't. You just spoke.
Go ahead. And then what
No.
So my background is also medicine, like, and my actual thing that I wanted to do is precision medicine in particular. And the reason I didn't do that is because I felt the current systems that we're using to approach the problem are insufficient. You're approaching it from the funding side, which I think is awesome. But I also think what sort of mechanisms can we leverage from the decentralized network to actually do precision medicine before like it's cool, right? There's a lot of, I think, low-hanging fruit available, and good examples are like, what's the name of the token? There was, do you guys remember this token that made you press every day for a token? Way back.
Is it sweat token or?
No, way back. This was like its own blockchain that was supposed to,
UBI,
what?
UBI, Universal Basic Income.
Was it the Pi token?
Pi token. It's a Pi token. So you downloaded this app. Yeah, and you're supposed to be mining Pi tokens by clicking the thing every day, right? But then they created a chat room for everyone in this Pi token, and they did a thing I found really cool, where it's like they would self-report COVID, and they would create this heat map of where people with COVID, like where, so you could like have an actual knowledge of in real time of this network. And this is something that it was very simple because the framework of communication was already established. But if you come at it from a government perspective, it's a super expensive problem to solve, right? And so my question is, with this in mind, like I do believe that there's a lot of things that could be done with little to no resource spent that could really start to paint a picture of a different type of healthcare that is led by data and awareness of preemptive medicine, rather than waiting for big institutions to spend millions of dollars on making a water solution. So the question again is, how can PoSciDon like be at the forefront of this as like the people holding the flag of personalized medicine, which kind of, I think you guys should start thinking about ways to leverage your community that you've already created to start doing precision medicine and not wait until it's like approved, right? Because it may never get approved if we don't show there's a better way to do it.
Yeah, so regarding the low-hanging fruit, there are, so the precision medicine or personalized medicine that we describe here is we mainly focus on the genetic makeup. So that is indeed not really the low-hanging fruit. There's not, when we look at a very detailed level of the genome, it's difficult for community members to just self-report.
Right.
So
what about people that could export their gene, like if they already have their gene sequence, like Promethease? Have you ever used Promethease?
Should partner with genomes now.
You can have just a database set up. Like that can just be the start of it.
yeah, I mean, the first thing is indeed like with PoSciDonDAO, if you have all that genomic data that we can leverage, that's great. But the importance of that is, so the first challenge is obtaining all that data. But then the second problem is analyzing that in such a way that we can have meaningful.
So I think the way the genome now works is they have biomarkers. I don't know much, but they have biomarkers to the underlying genetic profile. And so you can say, I want someone who has an aversion to caffeine or something like this, or a particular genetic makeup. And if they identify a vault that has that marker, then you can pay them directly to access the full genomic profile. You can still access the actual data, but it's just encrypted into the point of payment.
I see.
Yeah, it's also a nice way to use the governance you've established as like a reason of being. Like, okay, we are doing like retro PDF funding, but for research projects that use this data that we've collected, and also like precision medicine, like genetic data on a silo is actually not that useful at all, because you also need to know what's the age of the person, where they're at, what's their like. There's a multi-layered approach, and actually, if you want to get eventually scientific data, I mean, genome data, by starting with the data that you can get, you can already build a foundation on which create these hypotheses of, okay, we have identified this group why don't we spend money to pay for their sequences ourselves because we know they're of high interest. So that way, like your role kind of is like as a coordination point where you are matching your resources and the interests of the people to actually do like science on chain. And these results are as valid as any other result because like the proof is in the statistics, right?
I mean, there's like a couple million airdrop hunters. I'm sure like some segment of them have serious health issues or could be useful for answering research around health.
I'd love to do a mental health assessment of the dark crypto community. They really need some help. I mean,
You might be steering a little bit too far into the void if you do that.
It's not good optics from space.
I mean, if crypto airdrop hunters become like the most longest living people because, you know, like
They will have that.
right. And also like there's a lot of really interesting information about like people who are like post work in the sense of they're working in crypto environments versus people who work traditional jobs. It may be like a super interesting research just in itself. Like maybe we find that we're all super happy. Like why are these
Maybe
people happier than the average
oh yeah.
community? Oh well, because they have a sense of belonging, because they have means to get things done. So like you could actually make that the case for like more people to join this space just because you're proving that we're kind of happier than you.
Yeah. PoSciDOAO.
I have a question.
Happiness.
I have a question.
I have an actual question.
Please.
You said work in progress. I don't want to dig too deep if it's work in progress, but I'm interested about your other IP NFT framework. And what
I was going to present on it.
You're going to present on it?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I can do it really quick because then I could walk through it and then I could talk about something else instead after.
Okay. Can I?
Sure.
Yeah. I think you're going to get a lot of data as well. Second question, if we're talking about that. Second thing. You're going to get a lot of data. Do you have any idea what you're planning to do with that data in terms of like leveraging it in any way, shape, or form? Or apart from, of course, like using it for the genetic data, yes, but also the cohorts of people that come in, the types of people that are going to use this and just generate the data itself. Have you had any thoughts about what to do with that data?
Well, you mean what we do in data is like besides analyzing it and
Besides analyzing it.
Yeah.
Besides using it.
Like, okay, besides the primary function, there's secondary and tertiary functions to the data. Have you thought about what to do with that?
No, not yet.
Cool.
Not yet.
Imagining a better tomorrow.
Just the tip of the iceberg. Should have got that picture. That was such a nice
Imagine when people get drunk.
Which people? These people?
Me.
Yeah.
The eye of the beholder.
Shadi, do you want to just go straight away or shall I end it and restart?
Let's go straight away.
Okay.
Alrighty then. Does this work? Oh my goodness, it doesn't.
Oh no, what are you looking for?
You have a HDMI port from there?
No, this is a very impractical computer.
Take that.
Where's the adapter that we have?
Yeah, if you can find yours, I don't know where mine's gone.
What do you need, Josh?
Just the adapter.
Adapter and a charger would be helpful. Maybe I have
Where's my power brick right there?
Let me see.
Do you have a charger? Charger. I did not bring Have you guys seen our HDMI to Mac? Good. Okay, you can do the Apple TV streaming again. If you don't mind.
I'm on the Wi-Fi, so
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Oh, great. Is that yours? Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah.
All right.
I'll reshare it now.
Huh? Yes.
I'm going to share and tag you guys on Twitter, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Live now.
Alrighty then. Okay. So, hi everybody. My name is Shadi. I'm a co-founder of Holonym. Been in the DeSci space for a couple of years now. Originally have training in computational neuroscience. I heard about Web3 when I was trying to solve the peer-to-peer data sharing problem between institutions with large imaging data sets. And if you're trying to run any analyses on very large data sets to do like population averages across cultures or across different types of populations, you need to put all this data in one shared computational environment like Google Cloud or AWS or some cluster. But it's really difficult to do that in practice, especially with very large data sets. So I dove in, built some stuff, built this tool called PoSciDonDAO, which at the time was a free to use service. This is not maintained anymore, but it's up there if anyone wants to take a look at it. It's all open source. But the idea here is that you leverage Filecoin Plus to provide a free archival service as a public good to very large data sets that are critical for humanity, such as, for example, structural brain imaging data, diffusion tensor-based imaging data, which could run into petabytes, hundreds of petabytes, if you're building a really good kind of representative model of the human brain. So anyway, that's Upside Commons. I really got interested in identity, specifically in these distributed systems, because, first and foremost, if you're going to be performing any sort of computation or providing any sort of free resource, you need to have a plan for how you authenticate and verify that the content that's being published is really coming from real people, that they can assert true ownership over that. And we see that's a huge problem right now in science, even outside of Web3, in a permission system where you have paper mills and fake authors and AIs passing peer review. So I think moving forward, we need to think about how we can go back to the roots of open science, right? Like Galileo, when he used to communicate his results, he would actually use cryptography and a cipher and send a letter with the actual results of his research or models to his colleagues, and only give them the cipher when the result was ready to be shared, right? When the data came in or when it was verified. So let's continue that tradition. Today, I want to talk a little bit about not specifically identity, although I can talk about that as well. But I want to talk about an alternative IP NFT funding model that solves critical problems that remain outstanding. The first problem is the issue of redundancy, specifically for inventors, people that are creating new ideas, new concepts that could eventually be commercialized. The current climate forces individuals to operate in isolation or solitude, meaning that if I'm an inventor, it is not a good idea to reveal my trade secrets to other people, because first off, whoever wins the race first, whoever gets the provisional patent in first, whoever writes the perfect patent application first, whoever has the most money, the best commercial partner, is going to end up winning that race. So the game theory reverts to a competitive Nash equilibrium, where everyone has to act in their own interest in order to get their invention out there to make the impact that they care about. So that's the first problem, the problem of redundancy. The second problem is the issue of commercialization of IP. Well, let me go in order, actually. So the second problem is IP ends up getting locked up. A lot of universities, I did the numbers on this a little while ago. I think The University of California, the entire UC system has a couple $100 million in total value of IP, even though that's how they price it. But in reality, that IP goes unused because it's kept secret, it's kept locked up. Nobody can actually implement it. Nobody knows how to look for it. And most of that revenue comes from them enforcing, what is it, like commercial use case licenses. So they'll see somebody's using something that's derived off of some paper that actually has an IP that the university owns a significant portion of, or just outright. And then they'll go off and enforce that either like through a fine or through some sort of legal settlement, or they are able to collaborate and get some sort of licensing agreement. So yeah, so there's tons of IP out there. It's sitting, a lot of universities don't know what to do with it, and it never ends up being used. So the third problem is if you try to open source this IP, how do you make money off of open source? That doesn't make any sense, right? Like how can, if something is not a trade secret, then it's not valuable, right? It's not, nobody's gonna wanna use this. Anybody could copy paste it. How do you enforce that? So to solve this problem, you can create a mega IP attractor. This mega IP attractor is called Widea. What? The vor. Well, the vor is a bad thing.
No, sorry.
But it's like
It took your place.
The mega.
it's like a Dyson sphere around a singularity, whereas the vor is just a raw singularity, right? Like here you're using the heat energy that's generated by the singularity to create a flywheel effect and sustain some, anyway, cosmic civilization. We can plan that part later. But yes, okay, so Widea is actually, it's quite interesting because I'll just walk you through, pretend you're all inventors. Say all of you guys are all working in the field of material science, and you have some great new ideas of how to, like, I don't know, make solar energy more efficient or something like that. And now, you know, you don't want to share your information with each other. Maybe you've all found, maybe some of you found the same thing, maybe some of you found closely related things. So what I would encourage y'all to do would be to submit each of your project proposals to this organization called Widea, and it'll be reviewed by a panel of experts. Once it's approved, your application is matched with an external funding agency. So for example, an organization that is pre-committed to material science research, it could be crowdfunders, etc. Now, once your application has been approved and funding has been matched, then it'll be submitted for a provisional patent. And this will be done by a services layer within Widea that's staffed completely by lawyers. This provisional patent now has a 1-year timeline to become actual IP, to be ready to be submitted as IP. Now, the catch is, while the inventors, all you guys, the ones that got successfully past peer review, will receive some funding. You'll receive direct legal support. And you'll also receive tokens, but only after the provisional patent is accepted as IP. Now, the agreement here is if your IP gets accepted, you receive the tokens and it goes into a patent pool. Everything in the patent pool is open source by default for non-commercial use case. If anyone wants to use any IP within the patent pool for a commercial use case, they have to buy tokens off the open market. So the only individuals they can buy these tokens off of are those that were airdropped those tokens to begin with for participating in the work. So the basic idea here is you have a core services DAO that provides both legal services, peer review services, vetting services, and funding matching services with inventors that all pitch their ideas into a patent pool and give each other exclusive access. For any individual outside the patent pool that wants to use it for commercial use case, you have to provide exit liquidity for those that contributed to the work. So what does this really do? It de-risks the process of invention. across the board. It de-risks it for external funders because now they know that they're contributing directly to an accumulating pool of IP, not to individual inventors that might compete with each other. You're also de-risking the invention process for the inventors themselves, where by just participating and contributing to the patent pool, you're receiving tokens that eventually might have value if any one of those patent pool commercial use cases number go up. And there's a lot more here to dig into. And then there's other variations of this that are very interesting. But the basic idea here is it's completely permissionless. Other folks that want to just speculate on the idea, like kind of like the VitaDAO model, where VitaDAO has some IP and there might be some excitement around the potential of that IP. Anyone can buy VitaDAO tokens to drive that forward, to drive more excitement. You can do that in this model as well by having this open patent pool backed by these tokens. So yeah, so I'll pause there. I think this is something just worth kind of like taking some time to think through and maybe talk about. But my kind of idea here, or our idea here, is I think all of the domain-specific DeSci DAOs that are working directly to or facilitating research funding or working directly with inventors or researchers could be implementing a model like this that generalizes across all of the different use cases, which with some shared token. So you might have completely separate WeDAOs or sub-DAOs that are focused in material science or biotech or what have you, but there's a shared IP pool across these that provides a rising tide effect, right? And the basic idea here is it acts as an attractor. Once the first significant piece of IP is contributed to the patent pool, it creates a snowball effect. And it becomes more and more risky not to contribute to the patent pool, because that's where all the innovation and insight and data and intellectual capital is being concentrated. So yeah, that's all I got. I'll just preface that this is not my idea. I'm shilling this on behalf of somebody else, but I think it's a really great idea and has a lot of potential. Yeah, I think everyone who's building PoSciDonDAO should look into it. Yeah.
Yeah, firstly, I think it's great. It's nice to see different IP models popping up. I think that that's fascinating. Can I ask you questions about like the interactions and if it's not, you know them? Yeah.
I feel like I understand it like 80% of the way.
Okay.
But if I can, I'll reference you to the white paper. So,
Okay.
But go ahead, shoot.
The external funders, are they buying tokens in order to access it, or are they providing funding for the pool itself before?
So it depends on the organization. The external funders can be completely nonprofit, where they just want to give funding and see some impact. So the HyperCerts model actually plays really nicely into this, where you give them some notary of impact, and the impact evaluator is the actual DAO, the peer review, or the sub-DAO. The external funder can be, say, for example, another DAO. And in that case, that DAO is Web3 native, so you could strike a token swap agreement with them, for example. Yeah.
Do they, when the token is issued, did they get the token as well?
The DAO would receive an airdrop of the token as well. That's a variation you could
The
implement.
external funders.
Yeah. But if it's like NIH, they wouldn't want it.
They wouldn't.
Yeah. It depends on how you implement this.
Okay.
But you could do that.
Cool. The patents. Sorry, was there another question?
Yeah. Maybe you have a question?
I would like to, because you mentioned that, I have to clarify that. The VitaDAO token holders definitely don't have any upside on the underlying IP that VitaDAO is minting. That would make VitaDAO token security. This is why it's actually not the case. But if you know IP NFTs, they are fractionalized, and this gives you actually exposure to them.
I see. So where does the royalty come in from the IP then for VitaDAO? Because I just assumed it would be paid out.
This is explicitly not defined, because that already would make it potentially a security, because you already would buy tokens because you're hoping that you will get a dividend in the future.
I see.
That's why it's explicitly
That's
deliberately
interesting.
actually excluded, and this is highly dangerous mentioning that. I just want to mention, so you can do this in Web3, of course.
Yeah.
If you deal with real world IP, this could become a little bit dangerous if you're meeting the SEC.
I see.
But I wanted to ask a question that we quickly think about. How are you capturing the IP under the hood, actually? So if you say, I mean, this is all about commercial IP, right?
Yeah,
Not necessarily-
there's no on-chain. So the IP, there is no NFT. There's no need for an NFT
Oh.
because in general, like IP is off-chain. You know, it's an illegal contract. It stays in the legal contract. In fact, the entire teeth behind this model is you recruit it with badass lawyers that will go to war, that are values aligned with open source copyleft ideology. And what you're doing here is you're separating the legal world out from the on-chain world, and this legal wrapper acts as a bridge. So they'll go out, they'll make all the filings for the inventors, they'll create custom use contracts, licensing contracts, and I'll just mention also this idea came from a legal scholar. So they have like a lab, and they've been working on this for a little while, and I would assume that they would be the initiators of this. But yeah, so for example, they would have some bank accounts for the royalties that are paid off chain, and that would go back into legal services, and then that would be paid out into tokens for the token holders. Like they would do some sort of buyback off the open market. There's a lot of like details underneath that implementation wise. That would depend on exactly how you set yours up. But yeah, so it's all trad IP flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, specifically, I think the mention of dividends is what makes things really scary for a lot of people. Don't know if it's a legal scholar, if he thinks this might be a security, if he wants it to be. Because if he says the word dividends specifically, that's the security red flag. So if he wants it to be, which would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, how do you sort of mitigate for the free rider problem? Because if you have one successful piece of IP that generates the value for the DAO, what about like the 30 that are not successful? I mean, ultimately, that's not an awful outcome for society, but maybe for the individual researcher.
Yeah, so you're saying like if a researcher submits some initially promising idea, some IP, but then doesn't like follow through on it, and they're just sitting on a bunch of tokens and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like if there's 30 pieces of IP in the patent pool, and one of them is really successful, that creates the attraction, sure. But those other 29 guys have just got money or token ownership, maybe potentially equal rate to the person that succeeded, unless their patents provide value to the pool.
I mean, it just depends on like the shared value system of the organization that sets it up. So like if you're okay with being potentially a unicorn, the only unicorn in a batch of losers, and giving upside to that, then that's okay. And like, why would you do that? So like, there's specific people in this room that I would throw down with because I know they have a lot of potential and talent, and I'm okay with potentially sharing that upside with them. So so what I would say is it really depends on how you set your barrier to entry. Now, this is one way of doing it. And I think another way you could do this while also solving for the free rider problem is you have another layer to make things even more complicated for equity pooling. So now instead of thinking just about the IP that's generated by inventors, it's thinking about the startups that are being spun up by inventors. And the idea is this acts as not only as an IP incubator, but a general startup incubator, where the IP doesn't go to one single organization, it's pooled by all the founders in the organization. And to solve the free rider problem there, what you would have is kind of like a 6-month zombie period where somebody can stay, like as long as their company is alive and functioning, has activity, isn't dormant, is filing taxes, etc. As long as that's the case, then they're considered a non-free rider. They're still trying to make progress on their idea. It might take a while. But as soon as the DAO, whatever requirements are set, like, you had to file, taxes and show that you've been taking money and spending money and doing stuff and et cetera, or, show that you're by some qualitative process, like that you actually have things to show for what you're doing. Then you'd be put into this holding period where you have 6 months to get your act together. And if you don't within that period, then you're kicked out of the pool. So that's another way to do it with equity.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you could do, which is really exciting about this model, because I just think it's very radical with the value mindset. And I think it's one of those things that's kind of like truly truly trying to change the way that we deal with science and IP and ownership in general. I mean, I'd be in, but
It's Pareto. It's like a Pareto optimization where
Right.
you know nobody loses, right? But nobody like gains the maximum.
I guess we're trying to stop the min-max thing a little bit.
And then the fact is, like, if you can do this many, many times over, like, because this makes it more efficient to do this. You can pull your IP, you know, utilize other IP in the pool, and it gives you the opportunity not to be all in one basket. So you can spread out, do other projects.
Yeah, from an external funding point of view, I think this is super bullish. Getting an access to a lot of different pieces of IP.
Yeah.
Would the external funders have access to the IP to use for commercial usage as their kind of part owners?
Yeah, you could set it up that way. I think all of the examples I've stepped through with Prima and Crew is where the external funders would get to help decide with the DAO what the use terms are. So this might differ. You could even, like, for example, AI is a great example, where you could implement some defensive patents to prevent it being used in a certain way, right? Like, you know, if anyone uses this specific type of AI data set, model, or whatever for weapons research, then it would be illegal, right? Then they would file a lawsuit against you. Or, you know, you could have many different variations, like if it's price controls for drugs or.
If you create like a blacklist for if you have known people who are known to contribute in certain topics, you can keep them from accessing data about the topic you don't want shared on that domain. And you could use this as like a filtering machine that's like looking at your profile and giving you pieces of data that others have enabled you to have preemptively because of your profile.
So you're saying you can prevent, like, say, for example, like that new genetics paper that came out in Nature, and then a bunch of people with kind of racy, like they were using it basically for racism. They're saying, oh, look, like white people are smarter or more genetically advanced, but it's just a misinterpretation of the data.
You could keep them from further using that data because they have that paper. And it's down to the holders of the IP in general to decide like which like patterns you want to avoid. And for example, Palmer Lucky is all about like weapons research with AI. Like I wouldn't share my AI data with that guy because like he might use it to create freakishly good drones.
I mean, he might be listening right now.
Yeah. We're in some targeting computer now.
Yeah.
How do we get involved with the discussion and talking about like getting involved with this?
Okay, so my idea is so Prima's like, you know, go forth and spread the seeds. And I think like this happens when we reach a critical threshold of many diverse DAOs that would do this in different ways. And I think what's absolutely critical is having that core legal services DAO ready to go. So what I would suggest, and it's kind of in the back of my mind, is about a 10-day intense work retreat on setting up this specific idea somewhere that is accessible to everyone. And during that process, there would be, basically a finalized, like, to allow these ideas to bubble up to the surface. So kind of validating these components, specifying what the parameters are, writing up the documentation, preparing all the legal documents, et cetera, and then everyone can scatter off to the winds and do what they do, but we'll still be united by this smart contract. So we'll still be unified in some way, even though we might be working completely independently after this thing is launched.
So who's the point of contact?
Primavera, but I'm happy to help facilitate. There is, I mean, there's a couple different Telegram groups on here, but what I'll do actually is I'll create a DeSci summit specific group for everyone that's interested.
Yeah.
And then I'll use that to loop in everyone that I know is interested.
Yeah.
And then we'll see where we go from there.
Cool.
Yeah.
The meta group.
Yeah, sorry for all the groups. But.
Yeah. Cool.
Let's take a 2 minute break to like stretch legs, get water.